The movies have taught us how cops catch the bad guys.
Freeze! Freeze! Hands up! Drop it! Hey!
Practically every country has a police force ready to protect and serve with a gun on their hip. But not in the UK. Here all they have is a can of pepper spray and a baton.
And yet Britain is not a lawless society. It has some of the lowest homicide rates in the world. So how do British cops keep the peace when the long arm of the law only has a stick? 90% of the world arms its police. In some countries the reasons are obvious. America has enough guns for every man, woman and child, but not enough for everyone to go dual wielding.
And hey, we're not here to judge. There are lots of guns in America and we've got to give the cops a fighting chance. But let's look at a country where there aren't so many guns. Let's look at France. France has a fraction of the number of guns. Policing just isn't as dangerous there. And yet the cops are also packing heat. Fromage frais.
Well, the French state used to keep law and order with soldiers armed with swords. In 1791, the state put the soldiers into a new unit called the gendarmes. They were still part of the military, but were deployed full-time to policing at home. Crucially, this force was still armed, and they still are today. Guns are to French policing as French bread is to the French. You resist arrest at your peril.
America's story is slightly different. Because there wasn't an army until 1775, the first policing was done by community militias. In the South, the first paid police were assigned specifically to capture escaped slaves. In the North, the first police came from Philadelphia and Boston. Importantly, all these different peacekeepers were very much armed from the very beginning. Something to do with keeping the King of England out of your face?
So in the US, in France, in most countries, the police have always been armed. But in the UK, things aren't like that.
In Britain, every time there's a news story about the police, you hear the same three words.
We are policed by consent.
Policed by consent.
Policed by consent.
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 We've always policed by consent in this country.
But what does policed by consent actually mean? In the 19th century, policing in Britain was complicated. You had low-paid part-time night watchmen in the countryside. Most of them didn't want to do the job, so they were pretty rubbish. You had the thief takers, who were a bit like private bounty hunters for petty criminals. They were totally corrupt. And in London you had an official force called the Bow Street Runners, based at Bow Street Magistrates Court. You'd come here to report your crime, and they'd send out runners to catch the criminals.
But in the 1800s, crime rates were going through the roof, so the government decided to put law enforcement on the streets. But they saw what happened in France when soldiers started pushing people around. So the Brits did something else. They set up a new force for keeping peace on the streets. But this wasn't to spin out of the military, it would come from the citizens. This Metropolitan Police would be established on 9 principles. One principle being that they could only use minimal force, and another that they were citizens being paid to keep the peace. They were not soldiers. The Met was commanded by commissioners, not admirals or politicians. They followed the law, not royal decree. And they were not armed. Their authority didn't come from the threat of lethal force. It came from people wanting them to be there. This is the same model that all British police forces use today.
If you're watching outside the UK, you're probably wondering how the cops keep the peace without guns. Well, a rugby tackle usually goes a long way. Many officers are now carrying stun guns day to day, which does push things closer towards comply or I'll taser you. But if there is a baddie with a gun, which is rare but it does happen, there is an armed unit on call. And you'll always see cops with guns outside airports and government buildings.
And Britain isn't the only country that polices in this way. You have New Zealand, Ireland, Iceland, Botswana, Fiji, Malawi, the Solomon Islands, and many Pacific islands, and even China. Though they have their own ways of maintaining law and order. So why don't British police carry guns? Perhaps because 200 years ago, we decided we didn't want redcoats patrolling the streets, giving orders to people, just getting on with their day.
No name tag!
Forcefully open the door!
Have you not learned?